Ichigo is busy training to unlock his Bankai. Yorichi the cat is actually Yorichi the badass lady, and Rukia's execution is about to be underway. But I'm not here to talk about that. Any of it. Ichigo's hard at work picking up like 2 million different swords, but the world hasn't stopped to wait for him. There are other things that really caught my attention during this part of the story, so sorry Ichigo. We'll see you next video. Right now, we're going to talk about rivals. Rivals are very common in stories like this. They're used to help the protagonist grow stronger, try harder, to see parts of themselves in a mirror, all while showing why the main character is the one whose story is the real focus, and not the other way around. Sometimes they become even more dedicated to winning, often they become uneasy allies, and sometimes a bit of both. Ichigo has made a few rivals so far in the story, namely Renji Abarai and Kenpachi Zaraki. I love that in this part of the Soul Society arc, while Ichigo is hard at work trying to release his Bankai, his two primary rivals are making moves of their own, mostly away from Ichigo. But what I love most is that their trajectories all seem to stem from their fights with him. Both of these men were deeply affected in different ways by clashing swords with our substitute Soul Reaper. So let's talk about them. And we'll start with Renji. I've talked a bit about Renji in previous videos, but given some recent developments for where I'm at, he's worth getting more heavily in depth about. When we first met Renji, as discussed in my second Bleach video, go watch it if you haven't, he was introduced as a loud, aggressive, and brash character that was sent with Byakuya to arrest Rukia. Immediately he and Ichigo were at odds, and Renji was the first Soul Reaper to really see that the human substitute was going to be an actual problem. He was the first to see that Ichigo could hurt him, and could actually put up a fight. At the time, he helped bring Rukia back to the Soul Society, but once they were there, and her execution was guaranteed, that was when we really started to see him change and actually discover what drives Renji. We learned that there was much more to him and Rukia's relationship than it initially seemed, and his relationship with his captain, Byakuya, is also much more complicated than I initially thought it would be. It's a question of status and a matter of Rukia. Renji grew up with Rukia in the lower class, helping each other survive, but once they went down the path of becoming Soul Reapers, their paths were divided, namely by Rukia being taken in by the Kuchiki family. Renji already felt inferior compared to someone with Byakuya's nobility, but he also resented him for taking Rukia away, then had to serve under him anyway, all the while striving to prove himself to his captain. Renji wanted to show that he wasn't beneath Byakuya, even if everything in his world was telling him the opposite, between their upbringings and their levels of skill. It's an interesting angle to give to Renji's character because it gives him a very understandable reason to not only want to help his childhood friend, but to also help bring down the man that is set up as the ultimate obstacle of this story arc, and he really does give it his best shot. Like most great rivals, Renji has been growing alongside the main protagonist. Renji has grown stronger and learned more about himself. He even briefly trained nearby while Ichigo is trying to unlock his Bankai, something that Renji succeeded at before he did. When it finally comes time for Renji to try to save his childhood friend, he cuts down anyone in his path, including his fellow Soul Reapers, and it says a lot that he's betraying his own kind to save Rukia. His attempt finally brings him to the man that he has always wanted to beat, his captain, Byakuya. Not only has he wanted to become more powerful than him, but now Byakuya is standing in the way of saving Rukia. It was made clear when the two of these characters initially confronted Ichigo that there was a huge gap in power, but now, immediately shown by Renji blocking the move Byakuya used to one-shot Ichigo back then, we see that the gap of power between them might not be quite as big as it used to be. Renji has grown, he's learned, and he may be ready to take the shot that he's always wanted to take. Renji unleashes his Bankai even, and it's got this really cool, segmented snake design that's pretty cool. I like the way it incorporates the jagged saw edges of Zanpakuto. He's able to put Byakuya on the back foot, but you still get the distinct impression that the captain isn't going all out, mostly just humoring Renji, maybe a little curious even. And then Byakuya decides to show his own Bankai, and it is devastating. What I love about the different Bankai we've been seeing is just how different they all are, yet they all seem to so perfectly fit the individual that's using it. Renji's is just as wild and ferocious as you'd expect from him, stretching for things yet still too fragile to keep himself together. Mayori's is as off-putting and toxic as he is, while Byakuya's is precise, effortless, and deadly. Just so many blades that just slice through everything Renji has with so little effort. It's really crazy to see how all of those blades just quickly take out Renji, especially with how it completely snuffs out any hope that Renji had of finally being stronger than Byakuya. He's utterly beaten. With all of the training Ichigo is busy doing, it's a little nerve-wracking too. Will he have the same result as Renji even if he can achieve Bankai? That's a question on my mind with how this played out. Still, Renji refuses to give up, even to the bitter end. It's amazing how much I've grown to respect him over the course of this arc. Then there's the other rival, Kenpachi Zaraki, one of my favorite characters in the series. Kenpachi pushed Ichigo to his limits at the time they fought and forced Ichigo to grow closer with Sengetsu. It wasn't just Ichigo that was changed by that brutal fight though. Kenpachi seems changed by it too. For a man that is somewhat of a freak of nature power-wise, he didn't seem to care much about the power of his Zanpakuto outside of wielding it as an extension of his own immense power. But he finally seemed to have his eyes opened a little bit after fighting Ichigo, and that was because he saw firsthand how quickly Ichigo could grow when he had a real connection with his sword. He hasn't really pursued trying to learn his sword's name anymore than we've seen, but I'm hoping down the road he is gonna try to form an actual bond with his Zanpakuto, because if he's this powerful without even releasing anything, he's probably a monster if he can actually learn to use it properly. When we catch up with Kenpachi again, he's been licking his wounds after his fight with Ichigo and meets up with our heroes from the mortal world, who have all been taken prisoner, except Ichigo. My favorite part about all of this is that Kenny doesn't give a damn. He doesn't care at all about Rukia's impending execution, or the murder case of Captain Aizen within the ranks of the Soul Reapers. No, he couldn't care less about any of it. Ever since his stalemate with Ichigo, he's just had one thing on his mind, completely singularly focused on getting to feel those emotions again. He just wants to fight Ichigo, and if the intruders, Ichigo's friends, can bring him to him, then he doesn't mind helping them get free. He doesn't help them out for their sake, or out of the goodness of his heart. No, Kenpachi just wants a rematch. But on their way to try to get back to Ichigo, they're met by some resistance, including a pair of captains that haven't been focused on much, but that have their own distinct features Taite Kubo uses to make them memorable. Kenpachi offers to take on the two captains on his own, without any worry at all. This actually really took me by surprise. I knew Kenny was strong, obviously, but he really does seem like he's on a different level than his peers. But that didn't mean it was going to be easy, not at all. One of his opponents, Tozen, is someone who hasn't gotten much spotlight until now. He seems pretty interesting, and I'm hoping we get to see more of him, but he has apparently been blind since birth, and his Bankai seems tied to that, at least thematically. He unleashes it on Kenpachi, and it's kind of crazy. It creates a radius of darkness, and inside of it, his enemies can't see and they can't hear. Those two senses are completely cut off. The prospect of that is actually pretty terrifying, just having some of your most key senses ripped away, but our boy Kenny is completely unbothered, because in his own way, he's like, if you can touch me, I can touch you. He once again proves what an absolute badass he is. I love that he was reacting the second he got even remotely touched by anything, and that was how he was countering him, was he was just letting himself get hurt just enough to know where Tozen was. It was really cool stuff, and he kept doing this until he finally grabbed hold of Tozen and could see him again. This whole sequence is one of the most badass scenes in the series so far, but that shouldn't surprise me considering that, to me, Kenpachi is probably the coolest character in all of Bleach that I've met. There also seems to be some disdain towards Kenpachi from people like Tozen. Tozen is a captain that seems to be really all about the rules and about the order of things and about justice. And Kenpachi, by nature being this kind of violent psychopath in some ways, seems to completely kind of go against what Tozen is about. And he kind of looks down on him for it. But even still, Kenpachi takes him down, makes him drop his Bankai, and is ready to kill him until his other opponent gets in the way. Komamura is the only Soul Reaper captain that's bigger than Kenpachi. From the moment he was introduced, this masked behemoth reminded me a lot of Gregor Clegane from Game of Thrones, the Mountain, which in a weird way would kind of make Kenpachi the Hound, but as it turned out, the real Hound was waiting underneath the basket over Komamura's head. I was never sure what to expect underneath, but it wasn't that. Then he unleashes his own Bankai, and it's an even bigger warrior to fight. It's pretty wild stuff, and I was ready to see Kenpachi take on someone even bigger, but we don't get to really see this fight between the two. Still, just the amount of respect I have for Kenpachi just skyrocketed. He's fearless with simple desires and willing to help people if it'll help him. He just wants to fight another exciting opponent, and the fact that he seemed to have more fun fighting Ichigo than either of these two peers is very telling to me. Ichigo is special, Ichigo is different, and Ichigo is an exciting prospect for someone like Kenny. Both Renji and Kenpachi have pushed Ichigo to his limits before, just as he had pushed them to theirs. The actions they've taken since fighting him have been so interesting. Renji's eyes were finally open to the possibility of someone that's supposed to be lesser doing something great. And Kenpachi, well, Kenpachi finally found someone that really excites him, and frankly, I'm happy for him. Both Renji and Kenpachi took action against the other Soul Reapers, and despite their very different reasons for doing so, they have both proven to be fascinating characters that I hope stick around, and that I hope have more chances to try to bring down their mutual rival. But all of that has to be put on hold, because Rukia's execution has finally come. Thank you so much for listening, guys. I just really wanted to talk about both these characters. I've grown to love them both over the course of the Soul Society arc, so just wanted to take a little tangent and kind of vent about my love for these two and how much I enjoy their roles in the story. Thank you so much for watching. Please comment, subscribe, and we're finally going to talk about Rukia's potential execution. See you next time.